Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Corombos of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Jim Garrity was supposed to be back today. He will be back tomorrow. In his place today, once again, we're happy to have Andy McCarthy, former Chief Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. He is a contributing editor at National Review Online, and he is a Fox News contributor and the author of many wonderful books, including Ball of Collusion. Andy, great to have you with us.
Greg, great to be here.
And if you're wondering why Jim's a day late, check out the Morning Jolt today. Turns out he wasn't in Ukraine the whole time. And decided another war zone was worth visiting before he came home anyway. So
yeah. I wouldn't call him a warmonger exactly, but he's kind
intrigued.
of a...
He's intrigued by what's happening in these combustible places. Let's put it
He's
that
like
way.
a war devotee, I think.
Andy, we've got lots today. I'm not sure any of it's good, but some of it's nuanced. So let's just dive right in. First of all, the Senate yesterday had a chance for a layup. This issue already passed the House, largely along party lines. But yesterday, the Senate voted 51-49 to restrict males from women's sports. That would seem to be good news, but on legislation in the U.S. Senate, you need 60 votes to cut off debate, move to a final vote, which would be a simple majority. They didn't get to 60 votes, so Democrats keep stepping on this 80-20 rake. They can't help themselves. It's obvious from the reaction to the ads from the 2024 campaign, the generally supportive reaction to Trump's executive orders on the issue. But there is this absolutely entrenched far left part of the base that the party just can't quit.
It's really remarkable, although the reasons for it go back decades. I do think that one of the underappreciated parts of Trump's rise from the ashes, Greg, is he has an uncanny knack for being able to seize on these 80-20 issues that you mentioned. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be that hard for people to recognize, but the interorum effect of the left-wing base is so profound that even if we can recognize the 80-20 issues, there's reluctance to go there. And the strength of Trump, and I say this as somebody who, reluctantly voted for him in the end, but I was not a Trump supporter. But the strength of Trump is that he goes there and he doesn't really care about the blowback. In fact, I think he likes the blowback. But the blowback has the Democrats so intimidated that they're unable to act in their own political interest. Now, it's easy for us to say objectively what their political interest is, right? Because we don't have to deal with their base, which I guess changes their calculation of what their political interest is. But I think this is the danger of having a political movement that likes radicals a little bit too much, and that has let's face it, an admiration for political violence in service of the cause. Before people throw stuff at me over that, I would just remind people that once people like Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dohrn realized that it was better to run the schoolhouse than to blow up the schoolhouse, they ended up with second careers after terrorism in academia. And they were followed in that by, virtually everybody who was involved in the weather underground, all of whom, if they didn't get big jobs in the academy, ended up getting jobs like, for example, Susan Rosenberg, another of the weather underground terrorists, got a job managing money in the, cross streams of very largely funded left-leaning pots of money that, we generally say Soros, but it's not Soros. There's a lot more to it than Soros. It's bigger and deeper, and there were more actors involved in it. But all those people got influential positions in these institutions that Democrats control because of the admiration that Democrats broadly had for them. And if it's not admiration, then it's intimidation. But one way or the other, they're very influential. And that is a streak of the party that it can't be, if you're going to be honest about it, it can't be avoided. They have a faction, which may not be a large faction, but it's one that basically tells them, if you don't do what we want, we'll be on your front lawn tonight.
There's two major factors that I see. You certainly touched on one of them. That's the influence of the activists. And a lot of that, there's a lot of money among those activists as well, which the Democrats obviously want to keep that money going. And also, to cross over on this issue means you bring on the wrath of the media. It might be an 80-20 issue for the American voter.
Right.
It's not for the media. If you don't want that male who says he's a girl playing on the sports team, you're the bigot. You're the cruel one. It's not denying these girls the chance to compete on a fair playing field, work towards scholarships and that sort of thing. You're the bad guy if you want sanity to prevail. And so they don't want that blowback on a number of fronts, and they just keep handing Republicans the issue. So that's the good part of this, Martini. Republicans can keep beating them with the same baseball bat on the same issue in perpetuity here.
Yeah, I think they've also destroyed the disciplining mechanisms of an orderly society. If you say that we're not going to have rule of law, but instead it's going to be, sort of like political bean counting, like if we have X number of prisoners who are from this particular ethnic or racial group, and they seem to be in prison at a rate that is disproportionate to their rate of the population, the problem is not that they've offended at a higher rate. It's that the criminal justice system is inherently racist. And they've taken that crazy position and applied it across the board to the disciplinary measures that any orderly society has to have to make sure that people don't act the way that their lunatic base acts. And the problem is it invites people to do more and more outrageous things because they feel invulnerable. If you try to crack the whip on them, they say you're being a racist, which it's much worse in the Democratic Party to be accused of being a racist or to be accused of being anti-trans than to blow up a building in furtherance of the trans movement. I mean, it's just the crazy way it is.
Well, let's talk about something that hopefully we can all agree on across the board. This is even beyond an 80-20 issue. Omaha steaks are amazing. I've gotten them on my doorstep so many times. The steaks are incredible. The burgers are, like I just said yesterday, are really good size, tremendous flavor, filling but not heavy. They come with great sides. You will not be disappointed if you order it for yourself or you order it for a family member or a friend. Right now, you can subscribe at omahasteaks.com/3ML and get 12 free Omaha Steaks burgers in every shipment. That's a $431 a year value. Plus, you'll get an extra 10% off and free shipping for the life of your subscription. Now, keep in mind that the subscription plan at Omaha Steaks gives you commitment-free flexibility with the ability to skip a shipment, swap selections, change your frequency, or cancel at any time. And it also provides inflation-proof pricing. Your offer and price are locked in for the life of your subscription. That's very, very helpful right now. So make life easier by subscribing to the best. Subscribe to Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com/3ML and get 12 burgers free and free shipping for the life of your subscription. Plus an extra 10% off today and on every subsequent subscription shipment. omahasteaks.com/3ML. All right, on to our second martini here. If you were with us yesterday on the 3 Martini Lunch, Scott Bertram and I gave our reactions to the Oval Office aftermath. And my general take is that you can understand the points being made by both sides, but they have different priorities on those things. For example, Zelensky obviously knows that Putin has not honored previous diplomatic agreements. The Trump administration believes that diplomacy is the only way to get an end to the war here. And they also have disagreements on security guarantees and what that looks like and so forth. And then, of course, there's the debate over whose temper was the bigger factor here. Andy, you've written about this. You believe Trump is the biggest failure in this situation. Explain why.
Well, if he's not, then he should quit. He's the president of the United States. He's the one person who was in the equation who could have prevented this moronic thing from occurring. A lot of it had to do, Greg, with the fact that the session in front of the media, I think I said what I wrote, that it went on about a half an hour too long. Right. Thinking about it again, It may have gone on maybe 40 minutes too long. I don't think they should have been more than 5 minutes in front of the cameras, and that stuff should be pretty tame ordinarily. And there's tough talking that obviously needs to be done, but that's the kind of stuff that should be done behind the scenes. And the fact that it wasn't done behind the scenes that's Trump. That's nobody else could have decided that. If he decided he wanted it done behind the scenes, that's where it would have been done. As we know, a lot of these meetings that take place, there's no remarks that are made before the meetings. They may do a little photo op, but then they go in and do the tough talk, and then afterwards they come out and do, remarks based on what they've agreed on behind closed doors. But that was not a recipe for a good outcome, and Trump was the person who was in control of it. Then I just think there's basic assumptions here which need to be examined, because I think the administration has them 180 degrees wrong. One is peace. Trump keeps talking, I want peace. I want to bring peace. I need peace. Well, peace is not the absence of shooting. That's like one aspect of peace. But Ukraine doesn't have peace any more than Israel has peace if it's facing an aggressor enemy that uses pauses in the shooting, which is not the same as peace, as basically, strategic opportunities to gear up, load up, and get rolling again. So that's not, the idea that that's peace is nutty. If you just want to take American interests as your standpoint, which you would think would be the president's top priority, I don't mean to be callous about Ukraine and the Russian people and the suffering that's gone on in the war, which is caused 100% by Russia. It was Russia that decided to invade here. And the idea that they invaded because, NATO was going to be on the doorstep, and that's a red line from them. That's the biggest bunch of BS I've ever heard. They decided to do this. Ukraine and NATO are not looking to make an aggressive war against Russia, and Putin knows that. It's just a pretext to do what he wants to do. He's a revanchist who wants to reassemble the Soviet Union if he could. But if you look at what the American interests in this equation are, our main interest is that the international order can't tolerate an aggressor nation that crosses into another country and annexes its territory. That is, objectively speaking, more important to us than the numerical amount of the killing that's going on in the war. And I don't mean to sound callous about that, but the president's job is American interest. So his definition of peace is wrong. His understanding of what American interests are is wrong. And to my mind, and I say this as a proud, unreconstructed child of the Cold War, I guess, a 66-year-old child. This is the same error that he's making that's been made by every administration since Reagan had like the one moment of coherence and said that the solution here is we win and they lose. Ever since then, every administration to one extent or another has appeased Russia, tried to accommodate Russia, and essentially sought the big deal with Russia that was going to make the leopard change its spots and turn them into a normal actor rather than what they are, which is an incorrigible enemy of the United States. They couldn't have made that any clearer. And what astonishes me is that I find Trump's rhetoric with respect to Russia indistinguishable from Obama's rhetoric about Islamists. Obama spent 8 years telling us that it was basically all our fault, and if only we treated them with respect, and if only we admitted that we were the problem here, and tried to see everything from their point of view, they would become better actors. The specific case for this was Iran, but it's not the only case. This was the way he spoke about Islamists in general. And here's Trump. I mean, how much more clear could we see Putin than he had, than the 30-year record that he has compiled? A former KGB agent who ended up running the successor organization under Yeltsin's regime the FSB, but it's just the successor to the KGB. He's murderous. He probably is the one who did those bombings that were blamed on the Chechens and resulted in that 10-year bloody war. This guy is an evil actor, and he's been more unabashed in recent years about his hostility toward the West and toward the United States in particular, particularly with these pacts that they've done with the Chinese. He couldn't signal more powerfully that he's incorrigibly anti-American, and he fights our interests everywhere in the world. So I just think Trump is out of his mind if he thinks that he's going to make a deal with Putin that's going to turn Putin into a normal actor. What's happening instead is, if you decide that you have to be the broker, the impartial broker between a murderous anti-American tyrannical regime versus a regime that may have a number of problems, but at least it's pro-Western and pro-democracy, and it was the one who was attacked. And you think that your position in the world is that you have to be impartial between those two things? That's a morally incomprehensible position, and it's a politically impractical loser.
That's his contention, as you just said, is that he's got to not condemn either side because he's the arbiter, he's the negotiator, the mediator here. So if the consensus is, and I don't know if it's a full consensus, but it seems to be pretty close, that Ukraine can't physically shove Russia out of Ukraine, and that the fighting should probably come to an end, what do the terms need to look like? What teeth need to be in there so that Putin knows that he can't do it again? Or if that's possible, what disincentives are there?
Well, I mean, first of all, we're not in a position to dictate that, right? I mean, there's two parties to this conflict, and if you don't get both of them to agree on the terms, then you're not going to have an agreement. And it may well be that it's too much to handle for the Ukrainians that they could agree to something where they give up a fifth of their territory, especially under circumstances where it sounds to me like Trump is looking not to accept this as something like in realism that reluctantly we have to accept that Russia took this territory and there's no practical way of pushing them out. I think that Trump seems like he's willing to bless this as an international pact, which would legitimize what Putin did. If I were the Ukrainians, I couldn't accept that under any circumstances. So I don't think you get peace that way. You may get a temporary ceasefire, but they're going to have a bloody insurgency that's going to make Putin bleed. And if it were up to me, I would treat it like the Afghan Mujahideen. I would support them in it. Now, look, I understand and agree. I've actually, I think, taken a minority position at National Review. I'm not a big Ukraine fan. I believe that we owe it to them to give them some protection because we not only in 1994 induced them to give up their nuclear weapons, in 2006, Senators Obama and Richard Lugar got them to give up a lot of their conventional weapons. We've induced them to make these agreements that make them more vulnerable to attack by Russia, and I think that we owe them to fend off Russia when they're being attacked. That doesn't mean that you break the bank over it. We have a lot of things that we have to do. Nothing exists in a vacuum. Everything's a trade-off. I happen to think this is a pretty good deal where if you think about the amount of aid we're giving them, I think I heard, maybe it was John Cochran in the last few days mention that like the amount of aid that we've given Ukraine is less than what Biden wanted to sign off on to forgive student loans. I mean, we're not talking about like an enormous investment in relative terms, and we have no American boots on the ground. So what we're doing is destroying the armed forces or severely degrading the armed forces of an enemy of the United States with no American troops in harm's way, and all it costs us is money, which you can modulate over time depending on what your other needs are. So I don't see this as something that breaks the bank. But I'm also open to the idea that, like, other people have other ideas about what American priorities ought to be. And, obviously this is something that needs to be looked at constantly, given all of the challenges that we have in the world. But I just don't see why anyone's so anxious to make a deal. I think the only way that you're ever going to roll Russia back here is if they know that it's going to continue to cost them. And as long as if the Ukrainians are willing to fight, I mean, I wouldn't force the Ukrainians to fight, but if they want to fight, I would back them.
Well, one other development, of course, that happened on this front last night is that Trump has now paused all military aid to Ukraine. He says the pause won't stop until Trump determines that the Ukrainians show a commitment of good faith peace negotiations, and he also wants an apology from Zelensky as to what happened last week. I don't know how soon that will be forthcoming. It's probably one of the reasons you saw Zelensky meeting with a lot of the European leaders over the weekend. So we will see what Trump says tonight.
Yeah, maybe he'll tell us how much the Russians are going to now help us with Iran. While he's continuing to hammer Zelensky over the head, he's not only appeasing Russia on this, he's now bringing Russia in to be our intermediary, just like Biden and Obama. Russia's going to be our intermediary with the Iranians. So maybe we could get that Iranian nuclear deal done, too.
No, definitely opposed to that. That's what Biden did, and it didn't work. Didn't even get to a deal, thankfully. But the fact that the Russians would be considered an acceptable mediator was beyond the pale. So don't want to go down that road again, for sure. But here's a road you do want to go down, getting NetSuite by Oracle for your small business, because you don't know what's going to happen, as we've just talked about in world events, the markets, inflation, interest rates. You just don't know. But some things you can control. And for over 38,000 businesses, they've future-proofed their businesses with NetSuite by Oracle, the leading cloud ERP platform. It integrates key business functions like accounting, financial management, inventory, and HR into one seamless system, ensuring that businesses are ready for the future. You'll also be closing your books in days, not weeks, meaning that you spend less time on past reports and more time focusing on future growth. I speak with business owners and business experts for some of the other work that I do, and they tell you all the time, you have so many things you've got to cover, so many things you have to pay attention to. If you can get some of these tools to do the job for you, get one you can trust. It'll make your life so much easier. So if I needed this product, I'd definitely go with NetSuite by Oracle. In addition to that, they'll let you download the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning at netsuite.com/martini. The guide is free to you at netsuite.com/martini. That's netsuite.com/martini. All right, Andy, on to our final martini. I think this one can be safely classified as crazy. You have spent a lot of time in and around New York City. You are very familiar with the Cuomo political dynasty. Mario, the dad in politics forever, always rumored to run for president. Then Andrew Cuomo, he was a HUD secretary for Bill Clinton, and then attorney general in New York State. And for almost 12 years, the governor. He loves to hear himself speak. And as we have rumored over the past number of weeks, it's not a big shock. He is, in fact, going to run for mayor of New York City. And as I mentioned to Andy in our organizational email this morning, he should be disqualified just for having a 17.5-minute announcement video. Usually these things are about 2 minutes. Just get the idea out there. And for a guy as well known as Cuomo, you certainly don't need this. But he loves to hear himself talk. And here's what he thinks when it comes to the ability to solve problems. Here's what he pointed to.
And there are times when we struggle and endure great hardship. But we also know that we can handle a crisis because we have. We recently did it together through COVID.
Not sure his COVID record is the one we're all going to want to point to, especially if you had a family member die through his nursing home policy. One thing he did do fairly well is diagnose some of the problems affecting New York City.
And we know that today our New York City is in trouble. You feel it when you walk down the street and try not to make eye contact with a mentally ill homeless person, or when the anxiety rises up in your chest as you're walking down into the subway. You see it in the empty storefronts, the graffiti, the grime, the migrant influx, the random violence. The city just feels threatening, out of control, and in crisis. These conditions exist not as an act of God, but rather as an act of our political leaders. Or more precisely, the lack of intelligent action by many of our political leaders.
Okay, that's more than enough. This is a political rehabilitation project for Andrew Cuomo. As much as he's focusing on New York City, I think that's his major goal here, is for people not to remember him in the way he had to leave in disgrace from the governor's mansion up in Albany. But Andy, it's quite interesting how he's willing to point the finger at all these issues in New York City. But as you and I discussed before we started recording, he's leaving out an important part.
the you would know part that somebody would should be humming at the end of every one of his sentences. Look, Cuomo, you have to hand this to him. He's got two things that you need to be successful today. He's an excellent communicator, and he's shameless. So he is willing to rely, as most politicians are, on the fact that for whatever reason, name recognition seems to outweigh recognition of what a person's record is. And people have very little historical record beyond 5 minutes ago. To hear him talk about the policies, I mean, I love the part that you just read about the migrant influx. He's upset about the migrant influx. He's like Mr. Sanctuary City policies. I mean, that's how these policies came in under his leadership. He's been a big, heavyweight New York actor for many years. He was Attorney General of the state before he became governor. So, he's been on the scene for close to 20 years just in the New York government. And that doesn't count like his job in the Clinton administration and his other roles that he's played in government and in Democratic Party politics. So he's been on the scene and responsible for and had a big hand in all these policies that he's complaining about. So, the migrant influx, Cuomo. COVID, Cuomo. Bail Act, Cuomo. Rising crime, Cuomo. Like everything that you look at that's dysfunctional and wrong in the city, this guy's fingerprints are on it, and that's his qualification to run for governor. And the wacky thing, Greg, is there's a very good chance he's going to win.
No, that's true. Jim and I have talked about this before due to name recognition and the fact that Eric Adams is deeply unpopular, and most of the other people running will be even crazier than Andrew Cuomo. So maybe it's Curtis Sliwa time. New York, maybe it's time to bring in the guardian angels and get this job done the right way. But I don't think that'll happen. And yeah, he's got to be the favorite for the nomination. The early polls suggested, although that's basically on name recognition. But I'm sure he'll be flush with cash. And yeah, the guy you thought was exiting in disgrace will be back, probably with more disgrace to come. But that's not going to stop him necessarily from being elected.
There was a moment in time I really hoped that Commissioner Kelly would make a run for it, because I think he would have been great. He's he's never been in electoral politics, and at this point in his life, it's probably not something he thinks he needs. But he's a really smart guy, very strong on law and order, and he would have been a great mayor of New York City. But he just, in that moment in time when I think we got the run of De Blasio and then Adams. It kind of feels like when I was a kid, and like you had Lindsay and Abe Beam, and I mean these just awful. Yeah. And we're just in that era again. Except I think the biggest problem, Greg, seriously, and look, this goes to Cuomo's ability to be a great communicator, which unfortunately he is. I say that with regret, but he is. You just got to give him his due. But what I think is different about the city today than when I was a kid, even when the crime was very high, and the crime was much higher in toto years ago than it is now. But the thing that's omnipresent on the street is mental illness. And that's what makes everything feel unstable. I mean, there's also like the stinkweed that is now a feature of every big city in America, which is really awful and is no doubt contributing to the mental health crisis. I think we will look back, 20 years from now, all these legalization policies.
Big time.
That's going to be a big thing. But what makes the city feel unsafe and unstable is the random people who are obviously mentally in bad shape who are walking the streets, and it just makes it feel dangerous because it's clear they're not in control of themselves, and there's enough incidents of violence on people for like absolutely no reason, just random acts of brutal attacks that just gives the city a feel of instability and fear that I don't remember when I was a kid.
With Cuomo overlapping with de Blasio, there was really no hope for good policy there. They hate each other, probably blaming each other for the decline because that's
the only time either of them has ever shown any good judgment, the regard for the other one.
No, that's exactly right. And so I remember 12 years ago somebody telling me, for all his nanny state him, compared to what's coming, you're probably going to miss Mike Bloomberg. And I'm like, really? Now I'm starting to see.
True.
Now I'm starting to see that might be the case, which is pretty sad that's like looked back at with some fondness now in the city. But you get what you get, I guess. Andy, always great to have you. Thanks for your time as always. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Greg.
Andy McCarthy, former Chief Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. He is also a contributing editor at National Review Online and a Fox News contributor. I'm Greg Corombos. Jim Garrity should be back tomorrow, Lord willing, and we will look forward to his return. In the meantime, please subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Ask your friends to do so as well. We'd love to have them along. Thanks for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow all of us on X. Andy's at Andrew C. McCarthy. Jim is at Jim Garrity. I'm at Greg Corombos. Have a great Tuesday. Join us again Wednesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.